The baseball world lost a legend on December 20th, 2024. Rickey Henderson, known as the Man of Steel, passed away at just 65 years old. The cause was pneumonia. Henderson played 25 seasons for 9 different teams, but he was best known for his time with the Oakland Athletics. When news of his death spread, the reaction was huge. People across baseball showed universal respect, admiration, and awe. Fans and players alike celebrated him as a Bay Area and baseball treasure. But this video is not just about mourning a legend. This video is about something different. We're here to analyze the battles, the grudges, and the glory of Rickey being Rickey. Henderson's legendary status was not achieved despite his difficult persona. It was achieved because of it. His swagger, his superb, insolent confidence, and his hot dog style were not just personality quirks. They were deliberate, psychological weapons. Think about it. Rickey referred to himself in the third person constantly. This was not an accident. It was a strategy. By talking about Rickey as if Rickey was a separate force of nature, he created chaos in the minds of his opponents. He gained a psychological edge. He motivated himself by treating Rickey Henderson like an unstoppable brand. This egocentric persona caused immense friction throughout his career. In fact, the friction was so intense that even his own Hall of Fame manager, Tony La Russa, publicly blasted him. La Russa said Henderson was embarrassing himself and the team. But La Russa went even further. He delivered what might be the ultimate philosophical indictment of Henderson's career. La Russa said, and this is a direct quote, that Henderson is not a great player. Why? Because baseball is a team game, and you have to be as interested in the team as yourself. La Russa said that piece is missing with Rickey. Think about that for a moment. A Hall of Fame manager saying that one of the greatest players in history is not actually great. This was not about talent. La Russa admitted Henderson had special talent, but he said Henderson's selfishness disqualified him from true greatness. This video will explore the 7 specific negative interactions and rivalries that defined Henderson's career. These are the conflicts that show why some people could not stand Rickey Henderson. The first, and perhaps most important conflict, was with Tony La Russa. This was a battle over iron discipline. La Russa was a manager who believed in team-first values. Henderson was a player who believed in Rickey-first values. The tension between them exploded in September 1995. At the time, La Russa was managing the Oakland Athletics. Henderson was dealing with trade rumors. These rumors were being fanned by reporters, and Henderson's pride was wounded. So what did Henderson do? He declared himself mentally unavailable for a game against Baltimore. He told La Russa that his head was not on straight. He said he was puzzled by what his position was with Oakland. In other words, Henderson was so upset about rumors that he refused to play. This enraged La Russa. The manager was furious that a veteran player would let his ego get in the way of the team. La Russa responded by publicly blasting Henderson. He said Henderson had put himself in a position where he was embarrassing himself and the team. La Russa said he was going to have to embarrass Henderson in return. But then La Russa delivered the quote we mentioned earlier. He said Henderson has special talent and has done great things in baseball, but he is not a great player because baseball is a team game. You have to be as interested in the team as yourself. That piece is missing with Rickey. This was the ultimate negative critique from a team-first manager. La Russa was redefining greatness as a function of collective commitment. By that definition, Henderson did not qualify. This conflict was a proxy war for the soul of baseball. Is greatness measured by individual, unbreakable records, like Henderson's 1,406 stolen bases? Or is it measured by collective sacrifice and putting the team first? La Russa believed in the latter. Henderson believed in the former. But here is where Henderson showed his brilliance. He did not just deny La Russa's claim. He exposed La Russa as a hypocrite. When Henderson was informed of La Russa's comments, he smiled. He replied that his manager tells him to his face that he is a great superstar ballplayer every day. With one sentence, Henderson revealed that La Russa was two-faced. La Russa praised Henderson in private, but criticized him in public. This move flipped the embarrassment back onto La Russa. Henderson won the public relations battle by painting his manager as a hypocrite. Henderson also deflected blame for his own absence. He said people should get on some of the other players who have missed games. In other words, why single out Rickey? This was a brilliant political maneuver. Henderson turned a moment of personal weakness into a moment of strength. He made La Russa look like a liar, and himself look like a victim of unfair treatment. The La Russa conflict reveals something fundamental about Henderson's psychology. He was not just confident, he was defiant. He did not accept criticism, even from authority figures. He did not bow to conventional wisdom about what makes a great player. He defined greatness on his own terms, and when someone challenged that definition, he fought back with every weapon in his arsenal. Henderson understood that perception is reality. If he could control the narrative, he could control his legacy. And in the battle with La Russa, he controlled the narrative by exposing the gap between what La Russa said in public and what he said in private. Before we continue, we want to hear from you. Whose side are you on in this battle? Do you agree with La Russa that baseball is a team game and individual greatness is not enough? Or do you agree with Rickey that individual records and dominance are what define true greatness? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you are enjoying this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss more stories like this. The second major rivalry was with Reggie Jackson. This was a spotlight rivalry. Both Henderson and Jackson were two of the most significant and egocentric figures in Oakland Athletics history. They both wanted to be seen as Mr. Oakland. They both wanted the spotlight. And they both had massive egos. This created a natural tension between them. Henderson landed the final public blow in this rivalry during his 2009 Hall of Fame induction speech. This was the biggest day of Henderson's career. He was being inducted into the Hall of Fame alongside Jackson, who was seated on stage behind him. During his speech, Henderson poked fun at Jackson. He recounted a story from his boyhood, when Jackson refused to give him an autograph. Instead, Jackson handed him a Reggie Jackson pen. This was not a planned part of the speech. It was an improvised, on-the-spot moment. But it was not just a lighthearted jab. It was a final, public assertion of dominance. On the most significant day of his career, Henderson used his platform to frame Jackson as the arrogant old star who once snubbed the future star, and by implication, the greater star. It was a calculated move to win the spotlight rivalry once and for all. Henderson was repositioning their entire shared history with Rickey firmly on top. Think about the psychology of this moment. Henderson was standing at the podium, being celebrated by the entire baseball world. He had reached the pinnacle of the sport. He was being enshrined in the Hall of Fame, and yet he could not resist taking a shot at Reggie Jackson. Why? Because the rivalry mattered to him. Because he wanted everyone to know that Rickey Henderson was the true king of Oakland. Because even on his greatest day, he was thinking about competition and dominance. The story Henderson told was also revealing. As a boy, he had asked Jackson for an autograph. Jackson refused and gave him a pen instead. This was a rejection, and Henderson never forgot it. Decades later, when he had the chance, he publicly humiliated Jackson by telling that story to a national audience. This was not about forgiveness. This was about revenge. Henderson wanted Jackson to know that he had not forgotten, and he wanted everyone else to know it too. But the rivalry goes deeper. In 1991, there was a check from Reggie Jackson to Rickey Henderson. This check later sold at auction for over $14,000, and the story behind the check is fascinating. Jackson wrote a check for $1,000 to Henderson. In the memo line, Jackson wrote, "All-Star Ticks." At the time, Jackson was a television analyst and Henderson was a player. It is highly improbable that Jackson, a global icon, would need Henderson to procure $1,000 worth of tickets. The memo was a transparent attempt to hide a gambling loss. But here is where it gets interesting. When Henderson endorsed the check, he added a second signature on the back. Along with his signature, he wrote, "I am the best card player." Jackson himself later admitted, "I could never beat Rickey in a game of cards." This endorsement is the critical negative action. Henderson knew the canceled check would be returned to Jackson for his financial records. Jackson's All-Star Ticks memo was a weak attempt to hide the truth. By writing "I am the best card player" on the back, Henderson intentionally defaced a financial instrument to create a permanent, physical trophy of his victory. He forced Jackson to keep a permanent record in his own files. That record physically bound Jackson's lie, the memo, to Henderson's taunting truth, the endorsement. This was not just about winning at cards. This was about humiliating Jackson and making sure he could never forget it. Every time Jackson looked at his financial records, he would see Henderson's taunt staring back at him. This check tells us so much about Henderson's mindset. He was not content to simply win. He needed to rub it in. He needed to create a permanent monument to his victory. and he was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to do so. Most people would just cash a check and move on. But Henderson saw an opportunity to send a message, and he took it. This is the behavior of someone who is deeply competitive, deeply petty, and deeply invested in proving his superiority over his rivals. The Jackson rivalry also shows how Henderson used psychological warfare. He knew Jackson cared about his image. He knew Jackson wanted to be seen as the elder statesman of Oakland baseball. So Henderson attacked that image. He told stories that made Jackson look arrogant and stingy. He created physical evidence that made Jackson look like a liar and a loser. He turned his Hall of Fame speech into a platform for settling old scores. This was all about power and control. Henderson wanted to make sure everyone knew that he was the alpha dog, and he did. The third rivalry was with Gossage. This was an old-school pride rivalry. Gossage was a Hall of Fame closer with intimidating, overpowering heat. Henderson was a revolutionary leadoff hitter who changed the game. When these two faced each other, it should have been an epic battle. But the truth is, this rivalry was a complete and total negative for Henderson. In 11 career plate appearances against Gossage, Henderson was utterly neutralized. He failed to record a single hit. Let me repeat that. 0 hits. Henderson had 9 at-bats and struck out 9 times. He had a batting average of 0.000. He walked twice and had 1 RBI, but he never got a hit. The 9-to-0 strikeout-to-hit ratio is a stark illustration of complete dominance. Gossage rendered Henderson's entire offensive arsenal inert. This statistical failure explains the negative social dynamic of the rivalry. Gossage is listed as one of the 6 players Henderson could never stand. But here's the thing, this animosity was one-sided. One source notes that Gossage loved Rickey Henderson, but the feeling was not mutual. Gossage did not hate Rickey, he owned him. Henderson, who had proclaimed himself the greatest of all time, could not psychologically tolerate the existence of a pitcher who made him look incompetent. So Henderson hated Gossage not because of any personal issue, but because Gossage dominated him on the field. This is a fascinating aspect of Henderson's psychology. He could handle criticism. He could handle people questioning his commitment to the team. He could handle philosophical debates about what makes a great player. But he could not handle being dominated on the field. The Gossage matchup was a direct challenge to Henderson's self-image. Henderson believed he was the best. He believed he could beat anyone. But Gossage proved him wrong, over and over again. 9 strikeouts in 9 at-bats. That is complete and total humiliation for a hitter of Henderson's caliber. And Henderson could not let it go. He could not accept it. He could not move on. Instead, he hated Gossage. He put Gossage on his list of players he could never stand. This was not about Gossage doing anything wrong. It was about Henderson's ego being wounded. It was about Henderson's inability to accept failure. And it reveals a darker side of his competitive nature. Henderson was not just driven to succeed. He was driven to avoid failure. And when he failed, he blamed the person who beat him. The Gossage rivalry also highlights the limits of Henderson's psychological weapons. His swagger and confidence worked against most opponents, but they did not work against Gossage. Gossage was too old school. He was too focused. He did not care about Henderson's persona. He just threw the ball past him. And Henderson had no answer. This must have been maddening for Henderson. He was used to controlling the narrative. He was used to getting in his opponent's head. But Gossage was immune, and that made Henderson hate him even more. The fourth rivalry was with Nolan Ryan. This was arguably the fiercest rivalry of Henderson's career. It was a negative rivalry, defined by Ryan's overpowering heat and 2 specific, intersecting historical moments. The first moment was on August 22, 1989. On that day, Henderson became the victim of Nolan Ryan's historic 5,000th career strikeout. Instead of expressing frustration at this negative moment, Henderson took odd delight in it. He immediately performed a masterful act of psychological self-defense. He spun the event with a now famous quote. He said, "If you haven't been struck out by Nolan Ryan, you're nobody." With this quote, Henderson took a moment of his own failure and reframed it as a mark of his own distinction. He implied that only players of his elite stature were worthy of being a historic footnote for another great player. He could not allow Ryan to own the moment, so he attached his own ego to it as a prerequisite. This is vintage Henderson. He turned a strikeout into a badge of honor. He transformed a moment of failure into a moment of validation. He made himself part of the story. This is the psychology of someone who refuses to be diminished. Henderson understood that history is written by those who control the narrative, and he was determined to control the narrative, even when he was the victim. By saying that only special players get struck out by Nolan Ryan, Henderson elevated himself. He made it seem like Ryan chose him specifically because he was worthy. This is a brilliant piece of mental gymnastics. But the truth is more complicated. Henderson was struck out by Ryan because Ryan was better in that moment. There is no special honor in being a milestone victim.
Lots of average players have been milestone victims, but Henderson could not accept that. He could not accept being just another name in the record books. So he created a narrative that made him special, and people bought it. This shows the power of Henderson's charisma and his ability to sell a story. The second moment was on May 1st, 1991. This is the day that cemented the negative narrative for Henderson's ego. On that single day, two monumental, unbreakable records were set. In the afternoon, Henderson broke Lou Brock's all-time stolen base record with his 939th swipe. It was on this day that Henderson delivered his most egocentric speech. He famously proclaimed to the Oakland crowd, "Today, I am the greatest of all time." But hours later, one of his fiercest rivals achieved the statistically impossible. The 44-year-old Nolan Ryan pitched his seventh and final no-hitter. Henderson was upstaged by Ryan. This historical coincidence is the core of their spotlight rivalry. The negative element is that on the very day Rickey could finally, unequivocally declare himself the greatest, Ryan stole the headlines. Ryan forced Henderson to share the historical bandwidth. On what should have been Rickey's day alone, Ryan reminded everyone that greatness comes in many forms. Imagine how Henderson must have felt. He had just broken one of the most unbreakable records in baseball. He had given a speech declaring himself the greatest of all time. He was on top of the world. And then, just hours later, Nolan Ryan went out and pitched a no-hitter. His seventh no-hitter. At age 44. This was a direct challenge to Henderson's claim. It was a reminder that Henderson was not the only legend still playing. It was a reminder that greatness is not just about stolen bases. It is about dominance on the mound, too. And Henderson could not stand it. He had been upstaged on his own day. The headlines that should have been all about him were now split with Ryan. The sports world was talking about both of them, and in Henderson's mind, that was unacceptable. He wanted the spotlight to himself. He wanted to be the only story. But Ryan would not let that happen. This created a lasting tension between them. Henderson saw Ryan as a rival for historical significance, and he resented Ryan for stealing his thunder. The Ryan rivalry is different from the others because it was based on mutual greatness. This was not about one player dominating the other. This was about two legends competing for space in the history books. Both Henderson and Ryan were all-time greats. Both were setting records that would never be broken. Both were Hall of Famers. But Henderson wanted to be seen as the greatest. And Ryan's achievements on the same day as Henderson's record made that claim more difficult. This was a rivalry born from ego and a desire for singular recognition. The fifth rivalry was with Orlando Hernandez. This was an age confrontation. In 2002, a 43-year-old Henderson was playing for the Boston Red Sox. He had an argument with New York Yankees pitcher Orlando El Duque Hernandez. Hernandez's true age was a notorious public mystery. Nobody really knew how old he was. Following the argument, Henderson delivered a surgical, multi-layered negative comment to the press. He said, "He needs to grow up a little bit. I ain't a kid. When I broke into the game, he was crawling on his hands and knees. Unless he's as old as I am, he probably is."
This quote is a case study in verbal antagonism. In one breath, Henderson dismissed Hernandez as juvenile by saying he needs to grow up. He asserted his own legendary status and seniority by saying, "I ain't a kid." And then he delivered the kill shot. He made a sarcastic, public jab at the controversy over Hernandez's age. He implied Hernandez is both a child and ancient. This was a negative, rhetorical twist designed for maximum insult. This quote shows Henderson's skill with words. He was not just insulting Hernandez. He was making a joke at his expense. He was using the public controversy over Hernandez's age to score points. And he was doing it in a way that made him look clever and Hernandez look foolish. This is the behavior of someone who is highly intelligent and highly competitive. Henderson knew how to use the media to his advantage. He knew how to craft a quote that would be repeated and remembered. And he knew how to make his opponents look bad. The Hernandez incident also shows Henderson's pettiness. This was a minor argument between two players. It did not need to become a public feud. But Henderson made it one. He went to the press and delivered a calculated insult. He made sure everyone knew that he did not respect Hernandez. And he made sure Hernandez knew it too. This is the behavior of someone who cannot let things go. Someone who needs to win every battle, no matter how small. Someone who sees every interaction as an opportunity to assert dominance. And the age joke was particularly cruel. Hernandez was sensitive about his age because it was tied to his immigration status and his escape from Cuba. There were legitimate reasons why his age was uncertain, but Henderson did not care about that. He saw an opening, and he took it. He used a sensitive topic to score points in a petty argument. This shows a lack of empathy and a ruthless desire to win at all costs. The sixth rivalry was with Scott Fletcher. This was a humiliation catch. On September 17, 1990, Henderson robbed Scott Fletcher of the Chicago White Sox of an extra base hit. This was not a standard defensive play. It is cited as a prime example of Henderson's showboat snatch catches. A video analysis of the play shows that Henderson looked away from the ball 2 times to gauge the distance from the wall before making the catch. The act of looking away twice is the negative interaction. It is completely unnecessary for the execution of the play. It is pure hot dog performance. Henderson is not just denying Fletcher a hit. He is denying him respect. He is communicating, via body language, that Fletcher's best hit ball is so routine that Rickey can afford to take his eyes off it. This snatch catch is the physical manifestation of his ego. It turned a simple defensive out into a public, negative humiliation of his opponent. Fletcher was not just out, he was embarrassed. This play reveals Henderson's showmanship. He was not content to just make the catch. He needed to make it spectacular. He needed to show off. He needed to humiliate his opponent. This is the behavior of someone who plays for the crowd as much as for the win. Henderson understood that baseball is entertainment, and he was determined to be the most entertaining player on the field. But this showmanship came at a cost. It made enemies. Players like Fletcher were humiliated. They resented Henderson for showing them up. They saw him as arrogant and disrespectful. And they were right. Henderson was arrogant and disrespectful. He did not care about his opponent's feelings. He cared about looking good and feeling superior. This is the dark side of his charisma. He was captivating to watch, but he was also cruel. The Fletcher play also shows Henderson's confidence. Looking away from the ball twice is incredibly risky. If he misjudges the distance, he misses the catch and looks foolish. But Henderson did not care about the risk. He was so confident in his abilities that he was willing to showboat even when it could backfire. This is the mentality of a player who believes he is invincible. And for most of his career, Henderson was right. He was so good that he could afford to take risks that would destroy other players. The seventh and final story is about John Olerud. This is a widely reported, though possibly fabricated, story. The most common version of this story goes like this. Henderson and Olerud were teammates on the New York Mets in 1999. The next year, 2000, they reunited as new teammates on the Seattle Mariners. According to the legend, Rickey approaches Olerud in the Mariners clubhouse and asks why he wears a batting helmet while playing first base. Olerud patiently explains that he suffered a brain aneurysm in college and wears the helmet for protection. Henderson allegedly pauses, then replies, "Man, I played with someone like that in New York." Olerud's fabled punchline is, "Yeah, Rickey, that was me." This story is perfect. It is the quintessential Rickey being Rickey story. It perfectly captures the negative, self-absorbed persona that everyone expected from him. But here's the thing. This story is definitively false. The debunking comes from John Olerud himself, who has explained the story's true origin on camera. The story was not an interaction. It was a fabrication by Scott Lawrenson, the Mariners' assistant trainer. Olerud described Lawrenson as having a great, dry sense of humor and being great at coming up with stories. Lawrenson would find pictures in the paper, post them on the training room bulletin board, and make up a story about them. As Olerud explained, when Lawrenson found out Rickey got signed by the Mariners, he came up with that. He told the clubhouse guys, "Hey, did you hear what Rickey told Ollie?" And then they went and told the guys in the clubhouse, and it's kind of had a life of its own. This shows how easily misinformation spreads when it fits a pre-existing narrative. People wanted to believe the story because it confirmed what they already thought about Henderson. So they did not question it. They just repeated it. And Henderson paid the price. He became a caricature. He became a punchline. He became known not just for his achievements, but for his supposed stupidity and self-absorption. This was unfair. Henderson was not stupid. He was highly intelligent and strategic. But his persona was so powerful that it overshadowed his intelligence. People saw the swagger and the third-person talk and assumed he was a fool. They did not see the calculation behind it.
The Olerud myth also reveals something about how Henderson was perceived by his teammates. The fact that a trainer felt comfortable making up such a story suggests that Henderson was not well liked in the clubhouse. People were willing to laugh at him behind his back. They were willing to spread rumors about him. They were willing to believe the worst. This suggests that Henderson's relationships with teammates were strained. He may have been respected for his talent, but he was not loved for his personality. So, what do we make of all this? We have documented the real philosophical conflicts born from his ego. But there is a deeper truth here. Henderson's approach to the game was revolutionary. He changed how people thought about the leadoff position. He changed how people thought about base stealing. He changed how people thought about the mental aspect of baseball. He understood that the game is as much about psychology as it is about physical ability, and he used that understanding to his advantage. Henderson also understood that being memorable is as important as being good. There have been many great players in baseball history, but few are as memorable as Rickey Henderson. Why? Because he created a persona that people could not forget. He made himself into a character. He gave people stories to tell. He gave people reasons to talk about him. And in doing so, he ensured his place in history. The 7 rivalries we have explored show the full range of Henderson's competitive nature. He fought with managers who questioned his commitment. He feuded with peers who challenged his status. He resented opponents who dominated him. He mocked players who argued with him. He humiliated players who crossed his path. And he became the subject of myths that revealed what people really thought of him. These rivalries were not accidents. They were the natural result of Henderson's approach to life. He was always competing, always fighting. The conflicts and the controversies made him famous. They made him legendary. They made him unforgettable. But we also have to ask if there was a cost. Did Henderson sacrifice relationships for glory? Did he alienate people who could have been friends? Did he create unnecessary enemies? The answer is probably yes. Henderson's single-minded focus on his own greatness came at the expense of other things. He was not a beloved teammate. He was not a humble champion. He was not someone who made others feel good. He was someone who made himself feel great. And maybe that is okay. Maybe that is what it takes to be truly great. Maybe you have to be willing to burn bridges and make enemies. Maybe you have to be willing to put yourself first. Maybe you have to be willing to be disliked. Henderson was willing to do all of those things, and he achieved greatness as a result. The baseball world will remember Rickey Henderson as the man of steel. They will remember his 1,406 stolen bases. They will remember his swagger and his confidence. They will remember Rickey talking about Rickey in the third person. But we should also remember the conflicts. We should remember the feuds with La Russa and Jackson. We should remember the failures against Gossage. We should remember the battles with Ryan. We should remember the insults directed at Hernandez. We should remember the humiliation of Fletcher. And we should remember the myths, like the Olerud story. These conflicts are not separate from Henderson's greatness. They are part of it. They are the evidence of how he played the game. They are the proof of his competitive fire. They are the scars he left on the people he played against. And they are the reasons we are still talking about him today.
Rickey Henderson died on December 20th, 2024, but his legend lives on. And that legend is built as much on conflict as it is on achievement. The 7 players and the 7 stories we have explored are just a fraction of the battles he fought, but they are representative. They show who Henderson was, they show what he valued, and they show why he became one of the most fascinating and controversial figures in baseball history. When we look back at Henderson's career, we see a man who refused to compromise. He refused to tone down his personality. He refused to fit into the mold of what a baseball player was supposed to be. He created his own path. And that path was paved with conflict. Every battle he fought, every enemy he made, every controversy he sparked was a deliberate choice. Henderson chose to be the villain in some stories so he could be the hero in his own. And that is what makes his story so compelling. Henderson was not a perfect hero. He was flawed. He was arrogant. He was selfish. But he was also brilliant. He was strategic. He was unforgettable. And he achieved things that no one else could. The conflicts we have explored are not footnotes to his legacy. They are central to understanding who he was and what he accomplished. In the end, Henderson's greatest achievement may not have been his stolen base record or his Hall of Fame induction. It may have been his ability to create a persona so powerful that it transcended the game itself. Rickey Henderson became larger than baseball. He became a cultural icon. He became a symbol of confidence and defiance. And he did it by embracing conflict rather than avoiding it. And that wraps up our look at the legendary and complicated Rickey Henderson. What an incredible journey he had. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know your favorite Rickey being Rickey story. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.